I will teach you how to play the Pegasus system opening, which is an amazing opening that you can play with white. And this is a game I played today. It was an amazing game. I had a 2600 performance and a brilliant move, but I still ended up losing the game in the end. You will be very surprised how the game ended. But let's start with looking at the opening. So I played d4, the opponent plays knight f6, and the Pegasus system opening is knight to d2. Looks like a strange move. The plan is to play pawn to e4 if we can. All right, so the best thing for black to do is to play d5, to make that impossible and to go into the Pegasus system main line. But my opponent here played the move pawn to e6, which is actually a bad move. This is a Nimzo Indian type setup, but this is wrong because we play knight to d2, because then if your opponent lets you play e4, you can just play e4 and you have both pawns in the center, and the move bishop b4, which usually would pin a knight, runs into pawn to c3, and white basically already has a winning advantage there. My opponent didn't play bishop to b4. It was a almost 2200 rated opponent. They played pawn to d5, challenging the center. All right, what we can do as white is play e5, and in general with the Pegasus system your first idea is to play e4, and if you can achieve that, then you want to play e5, because it's very important to get a pawn to e5, because when we have a pawn here, that means they don't have the knight on f6. And if that knight is not on f6, there are often ways that we can try to attack the king, sometimes even do a Greek gift sacrifice. All right, knight to d7. So I play bishop to d3, set up the bishop. They play pawn to c5, but of course we have the pawn on c3, and this just protects our central pawn on d4. They take, we take, all of this is normal. And then black plays knight to c6, and this attacks the pawn on d4, so we need to solve it. What move would you play? You should try to think along and guess the moves. The move is knight f3, that is what I played, because this protects the pawn. Then they play a very good move, queen to b6, which attacks this pawn, and it also attacks this pawn, which is currently still protected. So basically this pawn is attacked twice. What move should we play here? I ended up playing knight b3, which I think is incredibly logical because you are protecting that pawn again. What's also possible here is to castle and basically go into this variation, which is a known variation from the French defense, where you basically give away a pawn, but in exchange you get a lot of tempi. You can keep moving and you gain some tempi on the queen. The queen has to move. But I just always like to play safe and solid and boring chess if I can most of the time. So I play knight to b3 just to protect the center pawn. They play e5, trying to kick away the knight, so we lose the central pawn. How do we stop this? Well, we can play pawn to a4, and then that idea is just completely stopped. Then my opponent played knight to b4. Chess.com says this is an inaccuracy. I don't think that this was such a terrible move. The only thing is I didn't do this in the game, but we could technically play bishop to b5, which is a good square for the bishop, and then this knight is looking a little bit silly. I instead just chose to be safe, castle. Yes, they take the bishop, but we take back with the queen. And I was looking at this middle game and I thought, yes, this is going to be a pleasant middle game for us that we can play. The opponent plays bishop to b4. And here is the first moment where I started thinking, okay, so usually in this opening, when we have the pawn on e5, the enemy king side is weak, because that knight is an important defensive piece. It protects h7. So I was thinking, how could I attack h7? So I played the move knight to g5, because, well, very simple. If they castle, you never know. That's just checkmate in one. And of course, I'm not hoping that they castle. If they do something else, it's actually still a little bit annoying. Because if they play h6, which happened in the game, they create an anchor point for attack, a weakness. If they play this, it's actually problematic because of queen f3. That's checkmate. Well, not checkmate immediately, but it's not good. It's check, they have to go there, and then it's knight takes d3. I will actually show this. Queen takes f7, knight takes e3, and they have to sack the queen. That's what I meant. And if they still end up castling, then there is queen to h3, and that is still coming. And if they play h5, there is g4, and then basically we are opening up the position and we are winning. So it's not so easy for black to stop this. The move looks a bit random, this knight move, but it's not a bad move because it's not so easy for them to stop this. They play h6, and here you have to make an important choice. Where do you want to put the knight? Only one move is correct. I didn't play that move. Where do we put the knight? The correct move is knight h3. And I was looking at this and I thought, imagine if I play knight h3 and he castles. I mean, the bishop, the queen, it's all looking in this direction, maybe knight f4, but I didn't really see anything there. So I said, okay, let's just go back to f3, and maybe if he castles, we might have a bishop sacrifice in the future. So that was my plan. This is still okay, by the way, for white. The other move was just a little bit sharper. Okay, so I'm looking how can we develop pieces, because in the middle game, what I basically always do is I always follow the CCTO steps, which is basically, do I have checks? No. Do I have captures? No. Do I have threats? Not really, so I optimize. That's what I always think about. Optimize means get pieces into the game. Bishop to d2 is a good move, I think. And my opponent plays bishop to e7, which I don't really agree that this is a mistake, but it's a bit passive, of course. So CCTO, no check, no capture, no threat. So we optimize, get the rook to the open file. And I feel like this position, although the material is equal, this was definitely better for white, because the black pieces are a little bit cramped. Like this knight cannot go anywhere. This bishop cannot go anywhere. The rook is stuck. The queen doesn't have that many squares. So it's like black is really struggling to find a way to get his pieces into the game. Knight b8, I found a very good move by my opponent. Very smart move because it frees up some squares and the knight can also reroute to c6. So that was a very, I call this grandmaster level move almost. Not many players find those types of moves. That's a very good move. Here I played queen c3. Don't mind the chess.com inaccuracy. I think it's logical. We want to double up on the c file. He puts the knight, Antonio's probably he puts the knight on c6. And then my idea was to play knight c5. I think this is just following CCTO steps. We didn't really have checks, captures, or threats. We didn't really have none of that, so it's basically just keep optimizing the position. The knight on c5 is a very good piece, and I was just doing the same thing again. Look, this piece is pretty much stuck. This bishop doesn't have good squares. Bishop d7, which is what he would want to play, leads to knight takes d7 with a beautiful fork as well. So this knight is a very annoying piece for black to deal with. So they have to give up a bishop to get rid of it. And giving up a bishop for a knight is usually not something that you want to do. I take back with the pawn, and I chose to do this move instead of queen takes. I was looking at queen takes, and queen takes b2, rook to b1, and I saw queen to a2, and I said, there's no way I'm trapping this queen, because the queen can zigzag out of the position with this maneuver. But looking at this now, afterwards, there is actually a way for us to trap the queen here. White to play. So the correct move would be rook to b1, and this would just trap the queen. If I had seen that move, I would have definitely played it. I don't know why, but like I only looked at moving the other rook, which is why I took with the pawn. Also because I found that this position was still good for white, because my plan in the middle game is usually to try to restrict my opponent as much as possible. Their pieces are still struggling. The knight still doesn't have good squares. The bishop doesn't have good squares. Like, they are really stuck. They are really stuck. Then my opponent played d4, and I was incredibly surprised by this move. I did think that they could play this potentially, but I was still very surprised. Because it's just a bad move. It's just a bad move. We can take that pawn. And that's a free pawn. It's just a free pawn. I think my opponent had plans of playing knight takes this. But that's definitely not a good plan. Because if we attack the queen, then the knight is also attacked twice. Or we could take on e6 with a fork as well. And that knight is pinned. So both of those would be winning. I think that's what they missed. And then they said, okay, I gave away a pawn, let's just continue. But this proves something that I say in so many of my videos, and that is if you just play simple, solid chess and you just focus on please don't blunder. That's all you need to do. Don't blunder. even these opponents, even 2200 opponents, they will at some point give away material. And if they don't, then it's just a draw, and then that's fine because it's a very strong opponent. And this is the moment where if you want, you can pause and you can think a little bit here, or you can think along with me, because basically white wins the game instantly from this point. I calculated for a while and I saw it. You can see my time is also low. White wins the game. Why does white win the game? Well, recently I released an attack course video, which you should definitely watch. It's an amazing video, which explains that the perfect setup in chess is having this with the pawn there and with the knight. If there is one difference in the position, it's usually still playable. If there are two differences in that position, black is losing or white is losing, depending on which person has the differences. So the knight not being there makes a difference. The pawn being here also makes a difference because that's something that we can sacrifice against. But we only have one piece into the attack. How could we bring more pieces into the attack? I played, after thinking for 1 minute, rook to c3. So we can bring the rook into the game. Rook to a3 is apparently even better because that rook was more useless. This rook was still doing some defensive duties. But rook to c3 is the move. And from this point, it's, I would say, just game over for black. There's literally almost nothing that they can do. So if you want, you can try to think along and find the best moves, but I still ended up losing this game. It's unbelievable. You will be so incredibly surprised how I ended up losing this. So my opponent played h5. What's the plan here for white? There are actually a bunch of good moves. I played rook to h3 to attack that pawn. Different moves are possible, bishop g5, rook g3, but I just thought, let's attack the pawn, all right? Because of course, if we could win that pawn, well, yeah, that's just great. You might also think, well, why did they play that pawn up? That's maybe a better question to go through first. Why did they play that pawn up? Why didn't they just double up the rooks? Well, because white has an incredible move here, a brilliant move. Bishop takes h6. Let's give this the brilliant icon. Yes, this would be a brilliant move. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes, check with the rook, king has to go here, and this is just checkmate. Queen gives a check, king has to go back, and there are multiple ways to checkmate. Basically, this is one of the ways, and eventually they cannot protect this, and we are going to get a checkmate with the queen and with the rook. Let's just play whatever move for them. Queen goes in, and then that's a checkmate. So I saw the checkmate that we could do after the brilliant move, bishop h6. That's why I was thinking so long about rook c3, because I saw this move. That's why the opponent, I think they played h5, trying to fix that problem of that sacrifice by pushing the pawn up 1, which doesn't really help because rook to h3 just attacks the pawn again. And then they play g6. Now the entire checkmate pattern that we have, or we had, I should say, is no longer possible. But we have a different type of checkmate pattern here, one that I think most of you will probably know. The problem is that they have a lot of dark squared weaknesses. They don't have a dark squared bishop, and they don't have a knight near the king. They actually don't have a knight at all. So they have a lot of troubles when it comes down to defending the dark squares. So we can just infiltrate on the dark squares and do a checkmate. Again, there are so many moves that win the game, but I played bishop g5 to make sure we can cut off the king from the queen from potentially going there, and then go bishop to f6, queen to f4, queen to h6, and then checkmate. I know it looks like a very long sequence, but it's actually just something that we can play and they cannot do anything about it. If you were thinking about bishop h6, I actually think that move is not so great. I had a look at this. I think the move is not so great because they can move the king, the rook, we go here, and then there is like f5. And I'm not saying that it's easy for them to defend this, but we are not immediately infiltrating. So the plan that you should usually go for in these positions is to get your bishop to f6 as quickly as possible. Because once we get the bishop to f6, we create this triangle shape for the king. And the king is basically stuck there, and they cannot really do much. They are pretty much stuck, well, I would say, in this small square, basically, because they can still go there. And then we just have a very easy game there to infiltrate with the queen. My opponent played the move rook to d8, hoping to make something happen, probably hoping that I would just take this, that they could take back, and then we would have an endgame where white is winning, but there is a better move here for white. So I think this is the most incredible moment from the game. If you want to think for yourself, now is the moment, white, to play how can we force a checkmate in 7, basically just unstoppable checkmate. So the move I played was rook h5. Brilliant move. And this is a brilliant move because we have that checkmate pattern that I just showed you. If they take, well, first of all, if they take my queen, that's the opera checkmate. That's back rank checkmate. If you think, wait, I don't know those checkmate patterns, you should go to pegasuschess.com. I have an entire course on every single attacking pattern, every single checkmate pattern. Everything that's in this game is basically in the course as well on pegasuschess.com. So that's why I have seen this before. I didn't just invent this myself. I have seen this before. I have studied games like this. And if they take your rook, well, the problem is we can do multiple moves. But basically we go here. I will try to make a move for black. It really doesn't matter. Check. And then this is mate. And this is also mate. But you might be thinking, wait a minute. Didn't you lose the game? Yes, I did lose the game. I played rook to h5. And then the entire screen went black. No internet connection. No internet connection. And I had a minute before I played this. The moment I released the rook, I had 15 seconds left, but no internet connection. So yeah, I lost the game on time. I couldn't connect fast enough with new internet, and my opponent stole some rating points here. But I hope that this was still a very good game for you to learn from, and as I said, definitely check out pegasuschess.com, top link in the description as well, to see my courses.